You're listening to the Good Old Boys Fantasy Football Podcast. Now here's your hosts, Kevin, Derek, and Alex.
All right, welcome in, ladies and gentlemen, to another episode of the Good Old Boys Fantasy Football Podcast. I am Derek, and riding solo tonight. Both Kevin and Alex got some work stuff going on, and I got some things going with the JOB. So it'll be me by my lonesome, and we'll be rocking and rolling through this thing and having a real good time tonight. And here to help answer any of those questions, any of those things that we got ready to go here. All that kind of good stuff. So excited to be here with y'all and excited to, be able to talk some football here on a Tuesday. So, kind of first things first, kind of open it up, and a couple of trades going on down the pike, right? The Jets and the Raiders making a deal and having Devontae Adams become a New York Jet, which, interesting to see how that one kind of plays out there with. Yeah, it does look like it's a little bit of a conditional type of pick, and so it'll be interesting to see how that ultimately plays out in this one. And with the Jets, it'll be interesting to see how that kind of changes the dynamic of the offense there. With Garrett Wilson was kind of starting to emerge there a little bit. Devontae Adams certainly coming in and certainly have that rapport with Aaron Rodgers. And we've seen the rapport factor work out pretty well with Allen Lazard so far. So it'll be very, very interesting to see how this thing ultimately kind of plays out there and how that will kind of look and work. And then, the other team that the Jets played last night in the Monday night game, not to be, not to be quiet as well. They decided to go out and make a trade, and Amari Cooper heading to Buffalo, and Marquez Valdez-Scantling looks like that was a roster casualty as part of that. So definitely some movings and groovings here. In the NFL season before the trade deadline and all of that, which is interesting, right? Because there's not a lot of these trades that really kind of take place, during the season, things like that. So very interesting to see this come through, and it'll be interesting to see how this ultimately plays out here as well, going down the stretch. But if you have questions, you have comments, you have concerns, throw them in the chat. Let's go ahead and chat about those things, and we'll go ahead and talk about that. Mr. Wumbo over on YouTube asking, where do you guys have Juju ranked this week in PPR? I was thinking about maybe putting him in the flex. So I checked Fantasy Pros and ESPN, and they have him at 24 and 44, which is a spread there. And it certainly is, right? Like that's a pretty big spread when it comes down to it, right? And Juju Smith-Schuster, it looks like it, like Fantasy Pros has kind of updated that it's at 29 for the, I'm sorry, I'm looking at half point. Let me get that updated here to full point and just kind of see what that looks like. But they've now got them ranked at 25. So somebody somewhere kind of changed the ranking there, which, and when you're looking at ESPN and Fantasy Pros there, right? Like ESPN's a couple of folks doing that. Fantasy Pros, certainly a bunch of the expert consensus rankers going through it and kind of the composite ranking to it. So what I would tell you is I'm probably kind of somewhere in between on that one, right? I think that Juju Smith-Schuster probably can have himself an all right game here, certainly worthy of flex consideration when it comes to it. But San Francisco gives up the 21st, so the 11th fewest points to opposing fantasy wide receivers. And that's who the Chiefs are playing this week. And this one here too, right? That with some Super Bowl rematch coming into play here, things like that could certainly change the dynamic of this game here. I don't know that I'm that big of a fan of playing Juju here, but certainly worthy of flex consideration. So Mr. Wumbo, it kind of comes down to, who would you be trying to play over Juju Smith-Schuster more so than just where would where would we have him at type of thing, right? So, it's everything out there. It's always very, where is it in relation to, and who would that be up against? And so, he's saying that a few of the folks over at ESPN saying that they've ranked him 52, 53, 54, which, I could get it, right? The certainly the matchup doesn't play out very well. But I don't know that I would put necessarily 50 people ahead of him this week, right? Because if you're talking about 50 people ahead of him, you're talking about guys like, just to start kind of naming a few there, right? Like you're putting probably Calvin Ridley and DeAndre Hopkins over him this week. You're probably putting Jalen Waddle in there with the quarterback experiment in Miami still going on there. Quentin Johnson's probably in that mix. Jerry Jeudy probably sees a little bit of a bump, right, with the Amari Cooper trade going down there. Khalil Shakir would probably be in that mix over him, which again, right, with Amari Cooper coming to town, like there's a lot of those things that I don't know that I necessarily agree with the 50 ranking there. Because I think I would be hard pressed to put 50 guys in front of him. And granted, I'm still kind of working through my rankings early on in the week here, but when looking at that, I'd probably somewhere as having him closer to probably call it wide receiver 24, 25, somewhere in that kind of deal. But when you start factoring in the flex side of things there, that does change that, because if you're just looking straight up flex rankings, that would put him closer to 50 in that mix, right? When I'm combining running backs and wide receivers and even some tight ends in there too, I would have some different things there. But yeah, certainly a really good question. And he says, I think on the team that they were looking at, it would be McConkey, Juju, or Mostert. Yeah, certainly good question there. Let's kind of see how this plays out here. So I think McConkey, I would have right around Juju when it's all said and done, but I'd probably have him just after it. The matchup's far better, but probably just after Juju. And as far as Mostert goes, I want to see Mostert, on the field, really kind of seeing something there. So I don't know that I necessarily want to trust my week here, but and the last time we did see Mostert out there, he returned a top 24 running back finish. Certainly had a lot of volume there. Indianapolis isn't a juggernaut at the run defense, but so I'd probably lean Juju in that mix there. And then Mr. Wumbo also says, have to figure out what Achane is doing too. If he sits, then I'm probably sending him out probably. So early setting rosters. You're right. It is very early to be setting rosters. So at that point, I would probably lean on the Juju, but certainly if we get some more information around Achane, and if Achane is going to miss time, certainly at that point I'm pivoting. I'm gonna put Mostert in that spot and have that rock and roll that way, just from the standpoint that Mostert will likely get the that kind of workload, and we'll probably see it up there with a with enough workload, enough opportunity to certainly be very relevant for fantasy. And at that point, I think he probably has a much safer floor than Juju. So again, some of that comes down to, do you need the floor? Do you need the ceiling play? And where that kind of comes into play as well. But really, really good question there. Ross over on YouTube asking thoughts on trading for CMC. Is the potential playoff worth the risk? That certainly is one of those, right? Like, it really depends on what you'd be getting for, what you'd be giving up for CMC, right? Like, we certainly know what the talent level looks like, and we certainly know what that could look like. The problem that remains is, where does CMC kind of fall in the remainder of the season, and when will he come back? This is one of those that I don't know that, you know, that I'm not looking to give up CMC compensation for CMC, right? Like, certainly not looking to try and go that route there. But if I'm able to get him on as a super buy low candidate, sure, I would probably try and do that one. Jordan Mason is has certainly shown that he's a proven reliable commodity there. I don't know that San Francisco is going to go into the full on CMC, hyper workload, 85-90% of the snaps when he returns. I think we're going to see a load management type of deal with this one. And certainly with Jordan Mason, being very capable, and what we've seen him do, right? Like, they could certainly use Mason to take some of that workload off of that, and allow CMC to kind of return to form, things like that. And San Francisco's goal is far more of the postseason run than a having a great preseason type of deal here. So I think that's a lot of the kind of concern there. I see that the comment coming in there that's the CMC owner wanted Connor and Tyreek was too much for me. That's way too much for my blood, right? Like, James Conner has been very good for fantasy this year. Rest of the season, I probably have James Conner over Christian McCaffrey at this point. So I'm not looking to necessarily trade down on that front. And the Tyreek side of things certainly pushes that way too far on the other end there. Tyreek is, Tyreek is still a top 10 wide receiver rest of the season at this point. I do believe that we're going to see Tua come back. His window kind of opens up when he can return on week 8. And if he returns week 8, week 9, like, you've got Tua and Tyreek going down the stretch together for a fantasy playoff push, and certainly would like the playoff potential for Tyreek there. I do like the strength of schedule for James Conner for the fantasy playoffs there as well. So I'm certainly not giving up that kind of both top end power and depth to try and acquire that one. So really good question though. Freezy Fantasy over on YouTube asking Justin Jefferson for Debo and Jaden Reed. It's a 10-person league, PPR, 3-3. Have Hurts, Derrick Henry, Bijan, Reed, DK, Debo, Terry, and Kincaid. So I get it, right? Like, Justin Jefferson is Justin Jefferson, and at this point, looking rest of the season, probably top 3 wide receiver there. Strength of schedule for both rest of the season and the playoffs, a little bit on the tougher side there, but Jaden Reed, I've got Jaden Reed as a top 10 wide receiver rest of the season on this one. And Debo, I've got him probably as a top 15 wide receiver. So, I mean, I don't know that I necessarily want to give up that much depth, right? I don't know that I want to give up wide receiver 1 and a fringe wide receiver 1 to get a elite wide receiver 1, right? Like, you can certainly understand the points there and all of that, but the differential doesn't necessarily make up for that. If I'm going to do that deal, it would require a different caliber of wide receiver than what I'm seeing here, right? With Debo, DK, Terry type of thing there. I might try and counter with and see if, maybe trying to send DK and, Terry McLaurin, right? Like, I might see about that, but that's a little bit of an overpay for me, but I can see why the Justin Jefferson manager is looking at it that way. But Let's see. Yeah, because if you trade that off, you'd be running DK and Terry as your kind of 1-2 punch as your second, third option there, and having to start one of those as your flex. So, I mean, I think Terry McLaurin will be a top 24 wide receiver when it's all said and done. I do think that we'll see DK in that fringe wide receiver 1 territory when it's all said and done here as well. But that's a lot of depth and to be given up on that one. And I'd potentially be trying to look at maybe a different trade option or a different combination to see on that one. Let us know what the bench looks like, and maybe we can see if there's a different deal and a different way to try and structure that. But really good question, Freezy. Ryan over on YouTube, should I trade Chuba Hubbard for Olave? I have Kamara, Najee, and Javonte as the other running backs, and Justin Jefferson, Puka Nacua, and Tank Dell as the wide receivers. So Chuba for Olave, I'd probably look to go ahead and do that deal if I'm getting the Olave side of that. And Ryan also letting us know that it's PPR. But with the PPR side of things, I mean, at that point, I wouldn't necessarily mind moving off of Chuba Hubbard. The Jonathan Brooks thing is going to start heating up here down the stretch, and I don't know that we're going to see much more long-term value in Chuba Hubbard. Part of the reason that we've seen Chuba be so usable for fantasy is the fact that we're seeing 70, 80, 60% of the snap share on this one. And when Jonathan Brooks returns to that, I don't know that we're going to be able to see this. And I don't know that we're going to see Chuba Hubbard still getting 18, 20 opportunities a game, right? Like this last game where, really the last few weeks, we're seeing well over 20 opportunities per game on this one. And I just don't see that continuing long-term here. And so if I can move off of Chuba Hubbard and I can move into Olave, I'd probably do that. Kamara's a smash start. Najee's been very serviceable lately, and Pittsburgh certainly kind of running the ball pretty well there. Javonte Williams has been serviceable to an extent, and definitely provides a little bit of depth there. So I don't mind that deal, and I probably would look to do that because at that point, when you start going down the playoff stretch, you're looking at hopefully a healthy Puka, Justin Jefferson, and then having to decide between Tank Dell or Olave as your flex type of option there. And if the matchups are tough for both Tank and Olave, then flex option between Javonte and Najee, whoever's not in that running back role. So I certainly don't mind that deal. Alrighty. And Mr. Wumble was saying, thanks a lot for the advice earlier. Ross saying, thanks for the advice. Much appreciated. Most welcome. Appreciate everybody tuning in, chiming in, and the questions in there. Ryan saying that it is a double flex. Okay, that does change things a little bit, but not much for me. I think I still do the deal from the standpoint that your flex option, typically can come down to Javonte, Tank Dell, or Olave, and kind of, navigating through that and playing the matchups at that point. I would look at potentially trying to add some other depth, things like that where I could, but I do like that roster and what that roster could look like with the deal. And Ryan saying that he thinks that they're going to pull the trigger. Thanks. Most welcome. All righty. Let's go ahead and head over to Jesse over on YouTube. Have Bowers and Kittles. Do you think I should sell high on Kittle? But I personally would. I'm not a fan of necessarily carrying two tight ends out there. I don't know that we're going to, George Kittle certainly has been very good for fantasy, and it's certainly been kind of that touchdown target or the red zone target. That's the word I was looking for. The red zone target, and has yet to deliver a less than a tight end one finish, right? But tight end 10, number 1 overall, missed the game, tight end 4, tight end 5, tight end 2. So certainly delivering very, very usable weeks out there for you. And so I do like like what he's produced there. Let's just take a look here and see on the Bauer side of things and what our thoughts are there. I mean, I think I probably have, Kittles and Bowers probably kind of right next to each other rest of the season. Bowers has certainly been a little bit more up and down, a little bit more, has a tight end 14, tight end 22 finish in there. So not quite as consistent, but still definitely usable for fantasy. And we certainly could see that that workload increase with Devontae Adams no longer on the roster there. So I would certainly look at potentially trying to move off of either Bowers or Kittle and try and get get another skill position, right? See what I could try and pick up at running back, see what I could try and pick up at wide receiver, and whichever kind of position of that is more of a position or need. I think I would probably lean that route and try and move off of that and see what I would be able to get on that front. Wide receiver wise, you're probably looking closer into wide receiver 2 territory. Running back wise, you're probably looking, in that running back 2 territory as well. So just kind of depends on what you can get for that deal. All righty, let's look at the next question. We got Juan over on YouTube. Fellas, just traded Tank and Josh Jacobs for Justin Jefferson. Fair trade. Still have Kenneth Walker, Breece Hall, and Kyron. Hope to pick up Tracy Jr. and Downs tomorrow. DJ Moore, Wandell, Jacoby Myers, and Ridley. Yeah, I would do that deal. Yeah, when I'm making a deal like that, I want the best player involved. So I like the 2-for-1 deal here. Definitely provides a little bit of the, roster flexibility to go out and try and add some of those waiver wires pickups there. And I do like Tracy and I do like Downs. Both of those guys as waiver wire pickups this week. I think that definitely fills in some of that depth on that. But I do like the fact that, right, the running back room is Kenneth Walker, Breece Hall, Kyron Williams. Like, that's a very solid running back room. And the Justin Jefferson certainly adds the punch that wide receiver room was missing, right? With DJ Moore, certainly has been very serviceable, been very good for fantasy. Didn't really have necessarily maybe probably that top end upside that Justin Jefferson would provide there. So I do like the fact that you addressed a kind of a position of need there. Wandale Robinson, if he keeps getting fed like he's been, that's serviceable there. Jacoby Myers, very interested to see what this Raiders offense looks like without Devontae Adams. And granted, we've seen kind of what that looks like. Jacoby Myers, a little bit banged up here this last week. And then Ridley, we'll see what that looks like here going forward on the after some of those comments and some of that, and see what that team does to change and react to that. So I do like the move on that one. And I do think that definitely provides some additional punch there. So I like it. B Sylvia over on YouTube, trade Tucker Kraft for Brooks in redraft. Ferguson is on bye. Would have to grab a streaking tight end on the wire. Yeah, I mean, I could see trying to move off of Tucker Kraft. Ferguson certainly has been good there. Tucker Kraft has been very serviceable for fantasy all season long. This week though, up against Houston. Houston is a very tough matchup for tight ends. They provide or give up the third fewest points to opposing fantasy tight ends. So I don't know that I'd necessarily be looking to play Tucker Kraft anyway on this one. So I mean, if you're taking Brooks, you're taking the hope on the upside there, and the hope that he comes in and ultimately takes that backfield away from Chuba Hubbard, going down the stretch into fantasy playoffs. So I don't mind the deal, but it is one of those that need to be mindful of what that kind of looks like. And yeah, I'd be viewing Brooks more as a depth piece than necessarily trying to fix a need at running back for me, and that's how I would kind of view that. As far as a streaking tight end on the waiver wire, if Zach Ertz is available, he's available in more than half the leagues out there. That would be a guy that I wouldn't mind grabbing and putting into the putting in off the waiver wire. Certainly has been very, very good over the season. Right, he's a top 10 tight end on this one. He's available in actually about 60% of leagues. Carolina this week allows the 13th most points to opposing fantasy tight ends. And Ertz is a very solid floor option for you at that one. Doesn't necessarily provide much pop on that tight end position, but pretty reliable 4 for 40 type of deal week in, week out. So I don't mind that deal. Marlon over on YouTube. Hey man, what do you think about Brian Thomas Jr. And Chase Brown for Marvin Harrison? What do you think of Brian Thomas and Chase Brown for McLaurin and Wan'Dale Robinson? Man, that's a good one. I can certainly see both of those sides of that. I don't know. Let's just see here. Brian Thomas Jr. I think we probably see Brian Thomas Jr. as a kind of back end wide receiver 2 rest of the season. Marvin Harrison Jr., I see him kind of in that fringe wide receiver 1. So I mean, you're kind of moving from back end wide receiver 2 to top end wide receiver 2 kind of territory as far as that would look for me. And then the Chase Brown side of things, I mean, certainly very usable, and he's certainly been earning more and more touches in that backfield. But his good fantasy performances have been very touchdown dependent. Now, Cincinnati's a team that's going to have to put up a lot of points to get there. So, I would tell you on the first part of that, it would really depend upon what the running back depth is. So if I've got some pretty good running back depth and Chase Brown's my 4th, 5th running back on the roster, I probably would do that to try and move up on that one. As far as the Brian Thomas and Chase Brown for Terry McLaurin and Wan'Dale Robinson, and I think Terry McLaurin is going to be a kind of that back end wide receiver 2 territory. Wan'Dale Robinson, yeah, that's that Giants offense does concern me. And I think we're looking at Wan'Dale Robinson probably closer to wide receiver 3, wide receiver 4 territory, and I'm talking more in the like 34 to 40 range type of thing as far as what we can see him rest of the season at that one. So at that point, I would see the Chase Brown or the Brian Thomas Jr. for Terry McLaurin as almost a lateral type of move there. Chase Brown for Wan'Dale Robinson side of things. And that's kind of where I'm looking at that, right? I'm just kind of piecing those together and kind of putting it that where do I improve at there? In that second trade, I get worse at running back by a significant margin, and I don't gain enough in wide receiver to overcome that. At least is kind of how I would look at that one. So I don't know that I would do the deal in the second deal, and then with the first part of that, it would really depend upon where the what my running back room looked like the rest of that way. So great question though. Duboy over on YouTube. Do I trade away Jaden Daniels and Garrett Wilson for Hurts and AJ Brown? That is a good one. And I can certainly see the appeal, right? When you're able to stack up guys like that and be able to kind of rock and roll it that way. I mean, it's a really good one there. So you're trading down just slightly in quarterback. And I mean, you're moving probably from quarterback 2-3 rest of the season in my book with Jaden Daniels to quarterback 3-4 in rest of the season to go to Jalen Hurts. Like, I see those guys as very, very close to each other. As far as the wide receivers go, AJ Brown, at this point, I think we pretty well have to consider AJ Brown as kind of that top 5 wide receiver, top 7 at worst type of thing rest of the season. Okay, rest of the season schedule there. Garrett Wilson, the Devontae Adams coming inside of things that does certainly put a damper, I do believe, on the Garrett Wilson side of things, right? Like Garrett Wilson, we've seen him, just be peppered with targets over the last little bit here, a couple of back-to-back 100-yard receiving type of deal, back-to-back touchdowns. I don't know that we're going to see that kind of target volume continue with Devontae Adams in town. So that does worry me there a little bit. And at that point, I probably see Devontae Adams in that wide receiver, that mid wide receiver 2 kind of range. So at this point, I probably would trade Jaden Daniels and Garrett Wilson for Jalen Hurts and AJ Brown, right? I think I make almost a lateral move at quarterback, and I think I get a significant upgrade at the wide receiver position. Now, the wide receiver position with AJ Brown, that is going to become far more. Garrett Wilson's been pretty consistent for you. AJ Brown is going to be far more boom bust. So it is one of those that I would also look at that from a standpoint of what the rest of my roster looks like. And do I have enough, consistency and floor plays in other parts of my lineup that I can withstand a bust week for my wide receiver 1? And that would be how I would kind of look at that one. But I really like that question, and it's a really good one. Frizzle over on YouTube asking Davis, Tucker, or Grando from the waiver wire this week. Let's take a look here. Really, really good question. I like this one. So let's see here. We have Grando much higher than a lot of the other fantasy communities has him out there. And we've got Grando as kind of a top 3 running back at the position this week for waiver wire. Davis, I certainly see the appeal on that one, right? He certainly played incredibly well and maybe earned a little bit more touches and opportunities there. But James Cook has certainly played extremely well for Buffalo all season long, and just because he missed the game doesn't necessarily mean that we're going to see him really give up a lot of that share, a lot of that time share there. So I don't know that Davis is super high on my list. I do think that we're going to see, James Cook return sooner than later, and I think that just puts a huge damper on Ray Davis. Like, I wouldn't be surprised to see James Cook back this week. Sean Tucker, that was a game and a half that he had there, right? Like, not often that you see a guy come in and do that. And he certainly earned, I think he's done enough to earn more touches in there. I think we see him certainly kind of come back to reality there a little bit. 9.7 yards per carry is a tough one. But if I'm going through and I'm ranking those things as far as what I'd be looking at on the waiver wire, kind of the priority there, I'd probably look at that with Grando, Davis, Tucker, kind of in that order. Is how I would look at that one. But really, really good question. Jesse saying thanks, boss, from earlier. You're most welcome. All right. And then Binkin over on YouTube asking, hey, would you guys stack the Rams or Vikings this week in DFS? Binkin with the DFS questions. I love it. Let's just take a look here and see what that looks like. At that point, I initially, kind of right off the cuff, want to lean on the Vikings. But I can certainly see the appeal with the doing the stack on the Rams with it being the Raiders, things like that. The Vikings Lions, I feel like that's going to be a far more competitive game than what we're going to see maybe out of the Rams and the Raiders. The Lions, just losing their number one pass rusher, that may actually provide a little bit more, offensive, may slow down the Lions defense there a little bit and allow the Vikings to put up some more points there. With the Rams, this is one of those that this game could get out of hand. Could get out of hand there, right? Like I would lean the Vikings at that point, just due to the standpoint that it'll be very interesting to see how the Raiders really kind of come out the gates and really kind of look here. But I'm going to check one other thing here and just kind of see what my thoughts are truly before we move off of this one. So Binkin, the other thing too that I tend to look at some of these is kind of where Vegas has some of these over and unders and where that kind of looks at as well, right? And where they opened and where they've moved to. So when looking at it, right, the Detroit Minnesota game that opened at 47.5 or 47 points is the over under, and it's moved to 50. So, things seeming to think that's trending for more points there, right? The Los Angeles game that opened at 46 and has decreased to 43.5. And I wouldn't surprise me to see that one come in even maybe a little bit under that as well. But, so yeah, I tend to lean on the points when I'm looking at those stacks there. And the fact too, right? Like I also look at some of the line movements on some of that things as well, right? The Detroit, Minnesota is down to a 2.5 on the spread there. So inside of a field goal, whereas Los Angeles and Las Vegas has gone up to about 6.5, favoring the Rams. So again, right at that point, I'm going to look at the team the game that I think is going to score more points and the game that I think is going to be more competitive throughout. And so that would be where I'd be looking to stack players and targeting a matchup there. So I like that. And if targeting that game, right, like there would be potential to target players on both sides of the ball with that Detroit and Minnesota game to really kind of come up with an interesting DFS lineup there. Milky Mills over on YouTube. I'm sorry, Millie Mills over on YouTube saying, "What's up, bro? Not much, just doing the Tuesday show." And Frizzle coming in asking Demario Douglas or Xavier Legette rest of season. This is a fun one. This is a good one here. So off the cuff, I would immediately answer Demario Douglas over Xavier Legette. But let's just take a little bit deeper dive here and just kind of see if I'm really feeling that way when I look at this a little bit more. So Demario Douglas, okay. Rest of the strength of schedule for the playoffs is prime, so that is really good. The Xavier Legette doesn't have quite as good of a playoff position for that as far as strength of schedule goes. The expert consensus and kind of the fantasy community would tell you Xavier Legette in that one. Personally, I'd probably lean the Demario Douglas. It'll be interesting to see how Drake May continues to progress throughout this and what will truly kind of happen once we see some of these teams get the film on him and start making adjustments and all of those things. However, I really think that the offense is probably more prime for Douglas to take off here rest of the season than Legette. Legette is I have a feeling that Carolina is going to play the quarterback roulette here again before the season's over, and we'll probably see yet another quarterback change. Xavier Legette is also, I think, probably the at best wide receiver 2 option on this one, whereas Demario Douglas, I think, is pretty clearly the number one targeted guy in New England. But really like that question. Cam the Ham over on YouTube. Team is Mayfield, Henry, Mixon, London, Diggs, Devontae Adams, Mark Andrews. Bench is Geno, Amari Cooper, Bucky, Irving, Jordan Mason, CMC, Mooney, Tolbert, 10-man PPR, 4-2. Should I make some trades or stand pat? And the 10 teams are a little bit trickier, right? Because everybody's got a little bit more stacked rosters to it. And at that point, I really like where you're at with your running back room at this one, right? With Henry, Mixon, Jordan Mason, CMC, right? Like you've got the handcuff there, Bucky Irving. Like I like that there. The wide receiver room is where I would be looking to try and potentially make an upgrade. And it's one of those that I may wait a week or two still at this point to see what what's going to look like in New York with Devontae Adams, see what that really kind of comes to play. Because if Devontae Adams returns to any semblance of Devontae Adams, then at that point I would certainly stand pat in the wide receiver rooms. If he doesn't, I'd be looking to potentially try and make a move there and see what that looks like, and potentially be trying to package a deal with Diggs and a piece to try and go out and get get an upgrade at the wide receiver position, and potentially be looking to try and make a move and see if I could move into a guy like Chris Godwin. Try and stack that up there, or see if I could potentially try and buy low on Nico Collins with the on IR and all of that. And so that's where I would probably be looking at potentially trying to make a move. I would be looking to address that tight end position. Mark Andrews is not doing you any favors. Maybe you can make a deal to, based off a name value to try and go out and get a tight end that could help you out there. Or in a 10-team league, I'd be looking at the waiver wire and seeing what else is out there. Seeing if a TJ Hawkinson is out there, right? And try and play the get ahead of that one and see if he's there. I'd be looking to try and see if Zach Ertz is out there and potentially trying to stream him a little bit. Evan Ingram would be another guy that I might try and target there. Some of those guys you'd have to maybe make some trades for, but Hawkinson, Ertz may be available on the waiver wire, and I'd be looking to potentially try and stash one of those guys. Ertz, I'd be potentially even looking to play potentially even as soon as this week. But yeah, that's kind of where I would look at it. At this point. I would see those two positions being kind of the ones to look at and kind of rock and roll from there. And Marlon, back to that question from earlier on the trade scene, the running back rooms is Gibbs, Mixon, Josh Jacobs, and Chase Brown. So Chase Brown being your fourth running back there. I would potentially think about doing that Brian Thomas and Chase Brown for Marvin Harrison Jr. deal. And at that point, I wouldn't have a problem with that one. I would be looking at adding some additional depth though for my running back room, right? Like one of those running backs goes down and you got a bye week, like that's going to spell some trouble. So that's something else that I'd be looking at and be very conscious of when I'm making the, making that decision. So would I take the Marvin Harrison Jr. side? I would, as that's constructed. But again, I would be very, very cognizant of what that running back situation is, and be potentially trying to add some additional depth around that one. Marlon saying that they like the McLaurin side though, maybe change Wandale for Myers. The Raiders RB1 now. Yeah, I can certainly see that, right? The logic's there. But if I'm trading Chase Brown, who is likely going to be a wide receiver or running back two, fringe wide receiver, running back two, for a wide receiver, I'm looking at getting equal or better type of wide receiver value at that point, right? Like Brian Thomas Jr. to Terry McLaurin, like I said, that's pretty much a lateral type of deal, right? Like, that's one of those that rest of the season, I would see those guys probably finishing, call it within 7-8 points of each other. So for season total. So at that point, you're talking like, less than 1 point per game to finish out the the regular season type of thing there, right? So at that point, I see that pretty lateral. If I'm making a move with the for the Jacoby Myers side of things, like I get that. Jacoby Myers is dealing with the ankle injury, which I imagine we'll see him back sooner than later. But again, right, like that's a little bit of an upward movement, but not enough of an upward movement at the wide receiver from what that Wan'Dale Robinson pick was to really kind of bring that home for me, right? Like Marlon, there's probably there's probably a chance that a guy like Josh Downs may still be on the waiver wire, and at that point, I think I may actually want. Well, Josh Downs, I think, may have a better potential to finish higher than Jacoby Myers when the season's all said and done. Yeah, the range that would start kind of putting that in play for me is guys like, maybe Jameson Williams, or maybe even taking the call on Amari Cooper, or even a Tank Dell type of things. But I'd be looking at better than even Jacoby Myers at that point. So I do like the Terry McLaurin side of it, though. Like I really do. I've got Terry McLaurin in the home league, and certainly has done some really good things for me on that one. But I just, at that point, if I'm trading that kind of running back depth, I want more bang for my buck on a return there. But I do like the question. Alrighty. Swamp Donkey over on Twitch saying Aaron Jones and Josh Allen for Jonathan Taylor and Trey Sermon. I'm already starting Burrow and have Purdy as well. So Swamp Monkey, I'm confused. Are you trading away the Aaron Jones and Josh Allen for JT, or are you getting the Aaron Jones and Josh Allen side? That's kind of where my question would be on that one. So, yeah, I need a little more information on that one to try and really assess that one to see kind of how it would feel. I mean, in most leagues, unless this is a super flex, which I doubt it's a super flex from the standpoint that you have both Josh Allen, Joe Burrow, and Purdy all on the same roster, if that's the case. So let me know what that one looks like and where that is in the as far as that goes. Terry over on YouTube saying rest of season on Ray Davis. Terry, you're bringing the good questions again tonight, and I like it. Man, Ray Davis, he certainly looked really good last night, right? Like there was some good pop there. There was some good things there. I mean, he got work out of the backfield. Like there was lots of things to really like out of that one. A good, yards per carry average at just under 5 there. And even managed to put up, fringe wide receiver or fringe running back 1 without getting into the end zone. But I do think that we are going to see this return to much closer to what we've seen most of the season, with the splits between him and James Cook, to the point where I think we see James Cook probably at about 65% of the snap share, 70%, and Ray Davis is in that 30 to 35 type of deal. So that does very much limit the upside that I see for him. That being said, I think that we'll probably see him maybe max out at maybe 10 opportunities a game. So at that point, that probably puts him much closer into like RB4 territory for me. I think that he probably moves up into top 48 running backs when it's all said there. Now, if that James Cook injury lingers, or he misses some additional time, that could certainly change some things there. But just as I'm kind of seeing this and what I would think as far as James Cook coming back and how that offense is going to look and operate, I would say Ray Davis is kind of that bottom end RB4 for me. Ness over on YouTube thinking for a trade in a PPR league, doing Marvin Harrison Jr. and Aaron Jones for Saquon and Worthy, who is winning the trade. In a full PPR league, I'm a big fan of getting the best player in the deal on that one. And Saquon Barkley is by far, especially this season, best player in the deal on this one. Aaron Jones, when it's all said and done, is, let's see here. I think I have Aaron Jones as kind of a back end RB2 rest of the season. Marvin Harrison Jr., I've got him as a fringe wide receiver 1. Worthy, I'm not necessarily a big fan of the Worthy side of that, because I think Worthy's going to be in that fringe wide receiver 3 when it's all said and done. But Saquon Barkley, I've got him as the number 1 running back rest of the season on this one. So you're gonna sacrifice. You certainly move up in running back. You're gonna sacrifice a good deal on the wide receiver side of it. So some of that also depends too on what else you've got as far as the wide receivers to be able to kind of manage that from a roster construct to it. And depending on who that does, I may or may not do that deal. But between that, just straight up looking at that without roster consideration in flex, I like the Saquon Worthy side of it. All righty. So Marlon over on YouTube saying the Marvin Harrison Jr. guy is considering Brian Thomas Jr., Josh Jacobs, and Kincaid for Marvin Harrison Jr. and Nick Chubb. What should I do? Please, quick. I'm a huge fan of Nick Chubb. I am not a huge fan of Nick Chubb for fantasy this season. I want to see what it looks like on the field before I go for it. And so at that point, I'm looking at it more from a standpoint of, Nick Chubb is not Nick Chubb, I think may take a little bit, right? When we see guys come back off of just ACLs, a lot of times it takes almost 2 seasons before we really see them return to form. And Nick Chubb had a much more intensive knee injury than just the ACL there. So there is some of that it does provide me a little bit of concern with that one. I don't know that I want to give up a Brian Thomas Jr., Josh Jacobs, and Kincaid, right? Because at that point when we're looking at it, Kincaid is, probably pretty fair to say a top 10 tight end rest of the season. Josh Jacobs is I think we have to consider him kind of in that fringe running back 1 territory. And Brian Thomas Jr., I've got him as a back end back end wide receiver 2. So I'm giving up a wide receiver 2, a fringe running back 1, and a tight end 1 for to move up into a fringe wide receiver 1, and Nick Chubb, who we don't know what that's going to look like. So for me, I'm passing. I'd rather have the depth on that than going after than going after that home run shot. And it certainly is a home run shot there, but Nick Chubb, man, like it's one of those that with the injury and where that is, until we see him return to field and we see that going, like I've still got to have him rest the season down there in RB3 territory, which I know sounds crazy, but 1, we don't know exactly when he's planning on returning, and 2, we don't know what that's going to look like. 3, that the Cleveland offense is pretty putrid at this point. They just traded off their best wide receiver. So, man, I don't know that that's going to. I'm not doing that deal. I'm sticking on the with the players of Brian Thomas Jr., Josh Jacobs, and Kincaid. Cup, Hubbard, JSN, JMO. This from Kells over on YouTube. Cup, Hubbard, JSN, JMO. Pick one for the flex. Well, I'm waiting to see the reports on Cup before I make any decisions on that one. And at this point, right, like starting to return, you're doing those types of things. Guys that have some of those injuries like that and coming off of IR, a lot of times I want to see what it looks like before I'm plugging them into the roster. So all of that being said, I think when I'm going to do my rankings, I'm probably going to have Cooper Kupp, if he's good to go, as a fringe wide receiver too. Chuba Hubbard this week. Let's see what that looks like. All right, so Chuba's got the good matchup against Washington. JSN, I like that one, but I think I'm still gonna go into. I think Hubbard's still winning that matchup there. Jameson Williams. Let's see. Yep, Hubbard's still winning that one. So between those, I'm still going to go with Hubbard, and even if Kupp's good to go, I think I'd still rather go with the. I think I'd still rather go with Hubbard this week in that one. So, great question, Kels. John over on YouTube. JD5 Purdy, Hubbard for QBs. Should I trade Purdy for Swift? Have Dobbins, Hubbard, Stevenson, Eckler? Yeah, I think that there's an upgrade required at that running back room in order to try and compete down the stretch there. I don't know that you're necessarily going to start Purdy over Jaden Daniels at kind of at any point in the season here. Bye week certainly, but week in, week out, I'm going to roll with Jaden Daniels and what we've seen there over Brock Purdy, right? Like, and as far as running backs go for Swift, yeah, I mean, I could see that one. I may also try and see about trying to swing a little different and see if maybe I could trade like Birdie for Tony Pollard. But I wouldn't mind taking the Swift side of things because Dobbins has been serviceable, right? But Vidal coming out and he looked pretty good when we saw him this last week. I maybe even might try and stash Vidal. If you've got the roster space to do it. Hubbard, I think we're going to see him start seeding some touches here going down the stretch and going into the playoffs as we see Jonathan Brooks return. Stevenson, I really like Stevenson there, but I do think that there's a little bit more depth required at the running back position for that roster. Kels over on YouTube asking Ramondre Stevenson, Tank Bigsby, Chase Brown, Tracy Jr. pick 2. Okay. Another really good question here. Let's see what this looks like as far as running backs go. Man, this is going to be one of those that it's a little tough because Ramondre Stevenson, just missed time. I do really like the matchup going up against New England there. I think Tyrone Tracy is in, especially if Devin Singletary misses additional time at this point. So I do like that one. I don't know that I'm going to necessarily roll out the Tank Bigsby side of things on this one. So let's just take a look here and see. Okay. I think how I'd roll this one is I think I'm going Chase Brown. I think I'm going Tyrone Tracy. And especially Tyrone Tracy if Devin Singletary misses. If Devin Singletary's active, plays, things like that, that may change that, and I may pivot up to Tyrone or to Tank Bigsby. But that one's going to be tough because that matchup with the differences there, right? That both Tank and Ramondre playing that early morning Sunday game over in London is going to require that one to that lineup to be set prior to the reports coming out on Tracy and Devin Singletary and what that goes. But honestly, I'd probably roll with the Tyrone Tracy and the Chase Brown side of things, and that's probably how I would look at that one. Joffrey over on YouTube asking, traded Hunt for Amari, did I win? At this point, I think it's probably a little too early to tell, right? Like, With this one here, it's Amari Cooper just got traded to the Bills. Certainly a much better offense, much better quarterback situation for Amari Cooper. But it is going to very much depend upon what we're going to see on this one rest of the season from him. Between the two, I think that it probably makes sense, right? From the standpoint that Amari, we'll likely see Amari the rest of the season. We may see Kareem Hunt fade down the stretch and into the fantasy playoffs, especially if Pacheco returns and returns to form there. So I could see it, and I do like that Amari side of that trade. But as far as did you win it, what I would say is it's just way too early to tell on that one. Kels over on YouTube, would you hold on to Jalen Warden, and how do you feel about Roschon Johnson rest of the season? So, Kels, another good question here for rest of the season. Let's take a look here and see. I don't know that I'm necessarily looking to try and get into you stay on the Jalen Warren side of things. And when we've seen him come back and seen him return, it's not necessarily the greatest thing out there, right? Like this is one of those that I think we're still going to see him somewhere in the 35, maybe on a great week, 40% of the snap share on this one. I don't think that we're going to see him necessarily get much of the running work to it. I think that's going to very squarely be on the Bijan side of it. And we haven't seen Pittsburgh really checking the ball down and doing the short passing game, things like that, to the running back side of things. And that's where Jalen Warren thrived in this one. And Justin Fields really hasn't been his game this year. Russell Wilson, that really hasn't been his game, his career. So I don't know that I'm looking at necessarily trying to hold on to Jalen Warren, but it also depends upon what it is that you're opting out for and looking to go at that one there. As far as Roschon Johnson goes, I would put him again in that touchdown dependent running back room, right? Like one of those that we're not seeing him get a ton of the snap share. So again, this is a guy probably about 30% of the snap share that we'll see him get when it's all said and done. Maybe I think on a good week, we may see him get up to, even 10 opportunities a game. So if he's not falling in the end zone, it's really tough to go ahead and utilize that one. And DeAndre Swift's been really good last couple of games there, and I don't know that we're going to see much of that change. So I like Roschon Johnson as a player. Just I don't know that we're going to see the opportunity for it to be fantasy relevant rest of the season. Chris over on YouTube, how much of a threat is a healthy Jonathan Brooks to significantly cut into Hubbard's workload? I mean, at this point, it's the key is healthy and what he looks like when he's on the field, right? This is part of the problem with rookies and all of that, and adapting to the NFL game. And typically, that's where we see some of these rookies really take a couple of weeks to adapt to that and start pushing forward on that one there. So I think talent-wise, Jonathan Brooks is a very, very talented running back. I think Chuba Hubbard's also a very talented running back there. But again, this is one of those that with running backs and with really any player that's coming off of an ACL, I want them in about the second season that they're back off of that one. But it wouldn't surprise me to see Carolina make that pivot and make that change to the point where it becomes a 50-50 type of timeshare going down the stretch here with a healthy Jonathan Brooks, to see what it is that they truly have there and how they want to maneuver going forward. Really good question there, Chris. Let's go ahead and head on over to YouTube Jelly of the Month asking, evening gents, half point PPR. This league can only roster 5 running backs. Currently have Gibbs, Achane, Bigsby, Tracy, and Braylon Allen. Drop Allen for Garendo or Jalen Wright. Achane handcuff. Yeah, I could see it. And the Braylon Allen side of things, I mean, I could see wanting to potentially move off of that one. I don't know that we're going to see a ton, a ton of difference on Braylon Allen and what we've seen, right? Like, certainly has had some performances, had some um some decent work here and there, but I mean, this is one of those that I don't know that we're going to see him ultimately get more than 10 touches a game. I don't know that we're going to see him, eat into more than, you know, I think that's still going to remain a 70-30 time split in favor of Brees Hall there. So I'm okay with dropping Braylon Allen, and with Grendo, I'm okay with going that route. I'm also okay going the Jalen Wright, as the potential handcuff there. Um, what that may look like. Grendo, though, this week has a incredibly difficult matchup, right? San Francisco, or I'm sorry, the Chiefs are giving up, really nothing when it comes to opposing fantasy running backs there. And it will very much depend too upon what the Jordan Mason injury looks like. I do think that we'll likely see Jordan Mason back this week. And at that point, I'm seeing it more of a timeshare than potentially, splitting that. But I think we'll see Jordan Mason still get 60+% of the workload there. And at that point, right, Grendo has some opportunities there, but this is one of those that, we're talking about a guy that's a third on the depth chart there. And when CMC comes back at that point, I think Grendo is, kind of obsolescent at that point in this offense. So I don't mind it, but I would also understand that there is a very limited runway with that one. John over on YouTube, 12-team league, start 3 wide receivers and a flex. Jordan, Jaden Daniels, J.K. Dobbins, Hubbard, A.J. Brown, Mike Evans, Terry Bowers, Cup, Commanders kicker, Chargers defense is my lineup this week. Finally healthy from injuries. I like it, John. It's a pretty solid roster. And so you're going back to the question of Purdy for Swift. I do like that move there, right? From a standpoint that I think that you've got some decent things there. But again, at that point, I think I would do it, right? If nothing else, it adds some depth into the running back room. It sounds like it's a single quarterback league, so I'm not looking to carry three quarterbacks. So for a single QB league, I like that deal, and I would go ahead and do it. Mr. Wumbo, trade away CD and Pittman and Bucky White for London, Brian Thomas Jr., McConkey, and Connor in PPR. No CD is crazy good, but giving away a wide receiver 1, wide receiver 3, and 2 RB3s for a wide receiver 1, wide receiver 2, RB2, and a wide receiver 3. Yeah, I mean, I get it. I get it. I just have a hard time trading away the best player in the deal. And CD is by far the best player in the deal. Let's take a look at the rest of this question. So the running backs as of right now are Hunt, White, Bucky, Bigsby, Mostert, Ford, Warren. So other than Hunt, it's question marks in Mostert, Bigsby, Warren, and the rest is a mess. I mean, I get it. I don't know that it takes all of that to make that deal happen. Right? Like there's a lot of kind of horse trading also going on in that one. So yeah, let's take a look at this because I don't know that you're going to necessarily. Let's see what this looks like. At this point, I don't know what that you're going to necessarily move that far up in wide receiver from Pittman to Brian Thomas Jr. Bucky, I get, right? Like that's a deal there. McConkey potential. Okay. I don't know that I don't know that I necessarily want to do that deal. If you want to go out and get Connor, I don't mind that, but I don't think it takes all of that other maneuvering to try and make a deal like that work. And if looking to try and go out and get Connor, yeah, this is one of those that James Conner, I think, rest of season is going to be in that kind of RB2 type of territory. I do really like James Conner rest of strength of schedule rest of season and playoff strength of schedule. But at the same time, I wouldn't necessarily mind potentially trying to go out and maybe see if I could get a deal done for Tony Pollard, Brian Robinson Jr., seeing something like that to potentially try and get an RB2. And at that point, I don't think that takes all of that kind of maneuvering to go through, right? Like if looking to do that deal, it wouldn't surprise me if a deal could get done with a, Bucky or White, depending upon which way you're leaning there, or even both at that point, and just trading away Tampa Bay's backfield, and Pittman to try and go get one of those guys, right? Like I'd even see about David Montgomery, see if I could package Bucky, White, and Pittman to try and go get Monty. I'd even counter back and try and do a 3-for-1 on Connor that way, or Pollard or Robinson. Like all of those, I don't mind that, but I don't want to give away CD and what that probably looks like, because CD is most likely a top 3 wide receiver rest of season. Drake London, I think, is going to be back end, and I mean back end wide receiver 1, top end wide receiver 2. Like that's almost fringe wide receiver 1 territory. And there's a lot of point differential in a per game basis on that point that I don't know that you're in the aggregate of what you're trying to do. I don't think you're going to make up in that one. So, yeah, I would try and do that and see if I couldn't try and make a move there and see. I'm also interested to see what some of the other wide receivers are in that one. But good question. Swamp Donkey, back to that question over on Twitch, saying the Aaron Jones and the Josh Allen, he's trading away the Josh Allen for Jonathan Taylor and Trey Sermon. I mean, I get that one. For the to try and get the Indianapolis backfield, but I don't know that I necessarily want to be giving up I don't know that I want to be giving up a QB1 and a guy that is going to be a high end QB1 right now. I'm not saying that you should keep him and Joe Burrow and Purdy as well, but I don't think that it's going to take Josh Allen to go and get Jonathan Taylor. And quite frankly, Jonathan Taylor, like I get it, that's far more name power. But if I'm trading away at Josh Allen, like I think I'd rather be trying to go out and get a Kenneth Walker. Potentially going out and try and get in like a Kyron Williams. Even Joe Mixon. Like there's other guys that I'd rather go with the Colts offense. I think we're going to see the reemergence of Anthony Richardson here coming down the stretch, and I don't know that that's going to spell great things for Jonathan Taylor down the stretch. And that strength of schedule during the playoffs is rough. So I'd be looking at some other options there on that one. And I think you're selling too low on Josh Allen to try and get Jonathan Taylor. So you can take that for what it's worth. I'm to be honest, I'm not the world's biggest Jonathan Taylor apologist there, but I think there's certainly some other guys that I would be rather going with, and guys that I'd be looking to try and move across and get into a much higher tier of running back than Jonathan Taylor for what I think will be rest of the season this way. So really good question. Terry asking the question, can you see Vidal taking over in the Chargers backfield? It honestly wouldn't surprise me. Now, do I think it's going to happen immediately? No, I don't think that to be the case at all. But I do think that Vidal certainly looked good in his debut there. I think with Gus Edwards, being on the IR, that's certainly going to open up more opportunities for him. And I do think that this is, one of those that we could potentially see him really, planting his flag on that. But I think he's got a long way to go to try and supplant J.K. Dobbins. J.K. Dobbins, when he's been in and he's healthy, has certainly looked very, very good and has been, hyper efficient on this one. But even as good as Vidal looked, like they still turned around and handed the ball off to J.K. Dobbins 25 times in this last game on Sunday. So I think that we can probably see this become maybe more of a little bit more of a timeshare. But I think this is maybe going to be I think that we might be seeing Vidal be able to maybe get up to 40, maybe 45% snap share on this one, but I don't see him truly taking over the backfield in Los Angeles. Really good question, Terry. Kels over on YouTube, Christian Kirk or Christian Watson in the flex this week. It's a good one. Let's take a look here and see. So Christian Watson, Houston gives up points in bunches to opposing fantasy wide receivers. So I do really like the matchup on that one. Christian Kirk playing New England. And that's not a bad matchup either. I've got them pretty close to each other when it comes to it. And at that point, I would tell you that it actually, you know what? When looking at that, at the matchup side of things, that leads me more into the Christian Watson side of it, just because the Patriots are giving up the 9th fewest points to opposing fantasy wide receivers, whereas the Texans are giving up the 5th most points to opposing fantasy wide receivers. So I think that there is something to be said on that front. Now, the other thing to look at there as well is I think that we may see potentially a little safer floor with Christian Kirk to it. You're not going to surprise me if we see him get 4 receptions for 55, 60 yards. So I could see that one coming into play there. Whereas Christian Watson is going to be far more of a boom bust type of play. It wouldn't surprise me if we see Christian Kirk get 3 receptions and put up 70 yards and a touchdown. Also wouldn't surprise me if we see him get 1 reception for 10 yards, right? Like there's a much bigger delta, I think, on the Christian Watson side of things. So as far as the flex goes, some of that's going to depend upon, my matchup and where that looks like. So if I'm playing the Christian, if I'm projected to win and at this point, I'm just needing not a dud performance out of the, out of that flex position, I probably lean in the Christian Kirk side. If I'm needing a little more upside, if I'm needing a little more firepower, I'm going with the Christian Watson side of it. But really, really good question there. Abreu over on YouTube asking, start Buffalo defense versus Tennessee or the Chargers against Arizona. Man, that's a good one. At that point, I initially lean on the Buffalo side of things over the Tennessee side of things. Or I'm sorry, the Chargers side of things. I do think that the Chargers will have an okay day against Arizona, but the matchup certainly isn't great. Buffalo has a very juicy matchup against the Tennessee Titans there. The Titans, they just have problems on offense. And It wouldn't surprise me if we see Will Levis do some Will Levis type of things and Buffalo create some turnovers there. So between those two, it's a smash yes on Buffalo for me on that one. Really good question. Connor over on YouTube asking, pick up Juju or Demario Douglas, roster spot open, full point PPR. Great question. Between the two, it's is definitely kind of a tighter one, and I can see I really kind of see the question. Now I'll be kind of upfront. I've been burnt by Juju in the past, so there may be a little bit of bias in there when I say this answer, but I would lean on the Mario Douglas side of things. I think the Mario Douglas will be the target leader rest of the season for the New England Patriots. I think Drake May provides some more spark and some more electricity, and we'll see him throw the ball down the field. And I think we're going to see him bring a different element to that offense than what we saw Jacoby Brissett do. Juju Smith-Schuster certainly has been having some good performances lately, but again, like with Rashee Rice out, Travis Kelce is going to be the target leader, I think, the rest of the season on this one. And so I'm going to take the guy that I think is going to be the clear cut number one for his team. And at that point, I would lean on the Demario Douglas side of it more so than the Juju side of it. Connor over on YouTube, and Connor, back to that other question. Looking at these things, looking kind of my rest of the season, I've got those guys really within about 3 spots of each other. So yeah, it's close. It's close. So Connor over on YouTube, trade Eckler, Jacoby, and $10 fab for JT. It's a no-brainer, right? Yeah, I wouldn't mind that deal. I would certainly pull the trigger on that one. Austin Eckler, I don't, we're not going to see Austin Eckler return to Austin Eckler form from years past, where we were seeing running back 1-2 overall. Jacoby Myers, I like the thought on that one and what that may look like for him being wide receiver 1 in Las Vegas. But yeah, I think we've got Jonathan Taylor, being a rest of season running back 1. So no brainer for me on that one. I like it. Mr. Wumbo, everyone thinks that Juju is the number 1 on the team, but who knows? It was only 1 week, but Douglas has been the wide receiver 1 on the team. He's just on a bad team. You're right? Like there is some of that the opportunities will be, potentially more and potentially more scoring opportunities, things like that for Juju. But there's a whole lot to be said about the fact that, for fantasy, especially if you're playing in a PPR or half point PPR, there's something to be said about being the number 1 targeted guy on a team. So, and Connor's thinking that maybe the Chiefs don't go out and try and get a real wide receiver 1. Mr. Wumbo coming back with saying like Calvin Ridley or something. I mean, potentially. We'll see what happens there, but and Mr. Wumbo kind of putting the exclamation point on the Pop Douglas side of things. 30 targets and 22 catches in the last 4 games, and that's pretty good. You're right, it is. Soren over on YouTube, should I trade Debo and Hurts for Hall? I have Jordan Love, Amari Cooper, DK, Tyreek, and Olave, but Chase Brown is my running back 2 right now. I don't mind it, but at the same time, like, I don't know that I necessarily. I would counter back and see if maybe they would take Jordan Love and Debo for Hall and maybe try and make that deal. I think that you've got the wide receiver room that you can make that work, especially if Tua comes back, and I would think that Tua comes back at the end of the season or before the end of the season, in which case I think Tyreek goes back to being Tyreek, and then you're settling in for Amari, DK, and Olave and playing the matchups and playing that as far as wide receiver 2 and flex. So I don't mind the deal, but I also I would feel better if I was giving up Jordan Love in that one more so than Jalen Hurts. But if it's going to sour the deal, I mean, I probably still might do it for Hurts, just realizing that that's probably a bit of an overpay. Alrighty. And then Mr. Wumbo saying that they tried to go out and get Pollard, but they don't want to get rid of him, sadly. Yeah, and that's kind of going back to that trade of the trade question with CD and all of that. So, like, I get it on that one. Again, at that point, I feel like it's still it's still an overpay for how I'm seeing that, because you're moving down in wide receiver, slightly up in wide receiver. You're moving up in running back, and then getting a wide receiver 3. And at that point, I don't know that I necessarily want to try and rock and roll that. I mean, it's your team, and you can certainly manage it that way. I just don't. I would see if there's a better deal out there, and see if maybe I could look at getting, right, if Pollard's out, maybe seeing about trying to get Brian Robinson Jr., seeing if potentially I could get a deal done for Aaron Jones. Aaron Jones would be kind of my last deal there. I wouldn't mind Najee, kind of rest of the season there, or seeing what it may take to try and get David Montgomery. There's a lot of other options out there that I would try and go with, instead of trying to do a 4-for-4 type of deal on that one, and see if I could maybe try and get a little bit of a more narrowed down deal there. Soren saying they were also offered Njoku and Hall for Amari, Bowers, and Hurts, if that seems any better. It doesn't. And here's how I would look at this one, Soren. So, if Hurts is on if Jalen Hurts is on the roster, Jordan Love's on the roster, it's going to be Hurts starting week in, week out on that one over Jordan Love, right? And so that's where I kind of look at that one there. Brock Bowers, I'd rather have Brock Bowers over David Njoku at that point. That's a pretty good downgrade in that. Amari, I think we see Amari's stock actually rise here with the trade to Buffalo, and I think that we may see this thing here over the next couple of weeks, where Amari Cooper, starts moving up into kind of rest of season rankings as a very solid wide receiver 2 there. So I get the deal on wanting to make that deal, but did you already counter back and see if they would try and do like Debo and Jordan Love for Hall? Like, I wouldn't mind doing the Debo and Hunt, or the Debo and Love for Hall, and see what that gets me. If not, I might try and shop around a little bit and see if I could potentially try and get a deal done with the Bijan manager, the Kyron Williams manager, and trying to get something like that done, or even going down a little bit in running back. And like I said, I brought up David Montgomery on the other one. I'm a big fan of David Montgomery. The strength of schedule is there. Like, this is a guy that will be a very consistent floor with high upside to it, and that's really what you want out of a running back too. Is somebody that can be a very high floor and provide you a couple of splash plays here and there. But I get the enticing for Hall. I just don't know that I want to necessarily maybe make that deal. It just seems like a very big overpayment for me at that point. Mega Brick over on YouTube. Full point PPR, start one, Judy, Slayton, Pittman, or Juju. Ooh. Okay, so we're kind of looking flex here and kind of looking all sorts of different types of things. Let's see what this looks like. All right, so we got Jerry, Slayton, Pittman or Juju. Between all of those, I'm probably leaning Pittman on that one. And I'd probably rank it Pittman, Juju, Judy, then Slayton is probably the order that I would rank that in. Mega Brick over on YouTube. Start one, full point PPR, Otten, Hunter Henry, Ertz, or Noah Fant. So we got a little tight end. Start one. I like it. Let's go ahead and take a look here and see. Ertz, Otten, Hunter Henry, or Noah Fant. Noah Fant would be the last on my list there. I would then probably lean the Zach Ertz, probably then lean the Hunter Henry side of things, and then lean the Cade Otton side of things. Would be how I would rock and roll that. Now I will be honest, the Hunter Henry, the Cade Otton, that could be a coin flip for me. But Zach Ertz, I would have above both of those guys. And actually, I'm going to go back and I'm going to look at that last question here real quick and make sure that it was actually in my right rankings here to see how I would look at that one. All right, so we had Judy, Pittman. All righty. You know what, Mega Brick, I'm going to pivot on that one. I actually would bring that up, and for this week, I'd probably go with the Juju side of it, even though Juju has the tougher matchup. Then I would go Pittman, Judy, and Slayton. Good question. Jordan over on YouTube saying, "Sup, good old boys. Are we in on Ray Davis?" We're in on Ray Davis if James Cook misses time. Other than that, I don't know that I'm looking to go that much. Darius over on YouTube, how you doing? Okay, so they have Amari Cooper as a flex, and they also have Hunt. Was about to start Hunt over Amari Cooper before he was traded to the Bills. Who should I start? This is a good question. All righty, let's take a look here and see. I'm probably leaning the Hunt side of things off the get-go, just from the standpoint of, yeah, sometimes it takes a little bit to kind of come up to speed with a new team and what that looks like. But I certainly understand the appeal of Amari to that new offense and what that may look like. So while I get the appeal, I'm going to still lean Hunt on this one. I want to see what Amari looks like in that offense for a week before I'm going to fire that one out there for my lineup. And Jordan saying that he's firing up Cooper as long as he plays. But I get it. There's a lot of positive upside for Amari Cooper this week and that change of scenery. But again, I'm going to wait and see what that looks like in a new offense if I have an option as good as Hunt to pivot to. Mega Brick over on YouTube asking, start one defense, Rams, Bengals, or Commanders. Another good question. We got the Rams, we got the Bengals, and we got the Commanders all this week. Let's see here. So it would be the way I would rank that would be the Bengals, then the Rams, then the Commanders in that order. Good question. Carter over on YouTube, should I trade Mark Andrews for Hunt and Najee and Hawkinson? I don't necessarily mind that deal. I don't know who the other Andrews is in that one. I'm reading that where it's trading Mark Andrews and Hunt for Najee and Hawkinson. And if that's the deal where I'm trading away Mark Andrews and Kareem Hunt for Najee and Hawkinson, I pull the trigger on that one, right? I'm worried about Hunt rest of the season and Pacheco potentially returning. I do think that Najee's got that backfield pretty secure. And I do think Hawkinson provides some pretty good pop when he returns and certainly can provide some Some good things at the tight end. I don't know that it necessarily can be much worse than what we've seen at Mark Andrews this season. So, okay, there's the clarification. Mark Andrews and Hunt for Hawkinson and Najee. I think I do that deal. I think I would pull the trigger, and I want the Najee and Hunt, Najee and Hawkinson side of that deal more so than the Andrews and Hunt side of that. So I like it. Blue over on YouTube. I'm thinking of trading one of my wide receivers for a running back. They've got St. Brown, Nabbers, London, and Hill. Wow, that's an impressive wide receiver room. Which do you have the lowest rest of the season? In between London and Hill, but leaning Hill just because of Tua. All righty. So really good question here. And rest of the season between these guys, like this was a really, really good wide receiver room that you have. Excuse me. So looking at it, rest of the season, I have got St. Brown as the better on that one, and then Malik Neighbors, then Tyreek Hill, then Drake London. I really like Malik Neighbors' strength of schedule rest of the season. Really like Drake London's strength of schedule rest of the season, and Tyreek coming back. I do think that Tua comes back. And if Tua comes back, I do think that Tyreek returns to Tyreek form. But this is kind of an embarrassment of riches that you've got at the wide receiver room. So it would very much depend upon which running back you'd be looking to try and acquire there and bring in. Like this is one of those that if I'm trading one of those wide receivers, I'm looking to try and go out and get certainly a top 10 running back. But if it's like Tyreek that you're looking to move off of, I'm probably upping the deal to try and go get a top 5, top 6 maybe. Which may be a little bit tougher, but yeah, I would be swinging for the fences at that one to make sure that I'm getting equal running back type of deal. Going out and getting Kamara, I get it. I like that. I like Kamara, and I do think that we've seen some good things here rest of season. One of the things that does worry me a little bit about Kamara is the fact that we have seen Kamara literally seems like he's been battling battling injuries all season long, starting even back into the preseason. So I don't mind it. I've got Kamara, kind of as that running back, probably about running back 8, running back 7, rest of season type of deal there. I certainly don't mind it. So Blue's asking, what are the top 3 running backs to get? I mean, if trading away Tyreek, right? There's going to be some of that the other managers going to be buying low on that one, right? So I get that one, but top 3 running backs that I have rest of the season. I'm going to go ahead and go kind of top 4 because I see them all in the same, see them all in a similar tier to it. Well, with the exception of Saquon. I think Saquon's going to kind of run away with that. And then I've got Derrick Henry, Breece Hall, Bijan Robinson, all kind of in that same tier there. And then kind of that next tier I would have in the, I think Kyron Williams kind of is another little tier break that stands alone there a little bit. He is probably a little bit closer to Bijan than he is kind of the next 3. I think Jahmyr Gibbs, Kenneth Walker, Alvin Kamara, James Cook, and Jonathan Taylor, Joe Mixon are all kind of grouped together there. So, and you've already got Kyron Williams. I just saw that one come in there. So, at that point, if I've got Kyron Williams, I wouldn't mind. I wouldn't mind going and getting the Alvin Kamara side of that. I think that's a very formidable roster that you would have. Is this I have a feeling this has got to be like an 8-person league, maybe even a 6-person league. just from the roster constructs there on how it's going. But so all the teams are probably pretty stacked there. But saying that they have Kyron and Jacobs, just trying to upgrade Jacobs. Do you think Hill for Bijan would be good? I would float it out there, and I would see if the manager would go with that. Blue saying that it's a 12-person PPR, just fleece some guys. LOL. Yeah, that's more than a little bit of fleecing on that one. So, that point, maybe I should be taking pointer from you on some of these trades, because holy moly, did you put together a roster there? But yeah, I would probably float it out there and see if I could get Tyreek for Bijan or Tyreek for like Brees Hall, and you just kind of see what that looks like. Even Tyreek for Derrick Henry. Derrick Henry's strength of schedule, though, is really tough down the stretch there. So I'm not as big a fan of that one. Whereas both Brees Hall and Bijan Robinson have very, very favorable playoff type of rosters there. So, yeah, that would be kind of where I would look in and just kind of see where that would be at. And it wouldn't surprise me if they come back and say that they wanted something more. Hill and Jacobs for Barkley. Yeah, I would pull that. I would do that if I was offered that. I'd probably do that one. And I do like Saquon Barkley a lot rest of the season. With your St. Brown, neighbors in London, I would just make sure that I've got some additional wide receiver depth there in case an injury happens to that one. But yeah, I like that deal. If you can pull that one off for Barkley, I would go ahead and do it. Jay over on YouTube, drop Devin Singletary for Algier or Isaac Guerrero. They have Mason. Unless, I don't know that I would be dropping Devin Singletary for Algier. Tyler Algier, I think this was more of an anomaly, what we saw this last week, than what we'll see going forward, right? I don't know that we're going to see him get that 18 carries and all of that. I think that this is probably one of those that we see him return back into that 10 to maybe 15 carry category there. So, yeah, that's kind of where I would look at that one. As far as Devin Singletary goes, though, I get that Tyrone Tracy has been pretty good, but I would still put Devin Singletary over Tyler Algier rest of season. And Isaiah Guerrero, Arguendo, I do think that makes sense with the Mason side of things, but again, I think that that's maybe a 1 or 2 week rental, more so than a season long deal there. So unless absolutely just hurting at running back and have to drop a guy to make a start this week, I think I'd hold on to the Devin Singletary side. Abreu over on YouTube saying that Kraft is droppable. I don't know that I would go that far. I think he's still in a good offense and all of that. And tight ends are very much a pretty much a touchdown dependent type of position for the most part, and certainly starting to kind of play out that way. But I can understand that after a disappointing performance, how somebody could feel that way. Blue over on YouTube would have no running back depth. Going to add Blake Corum, but I got Allen, Spears, and Tracy on the bench. Well, that's a good point there. Maybe at that point, it wouldn't be necessarily trading for a top end running back. Maybe it would be worth maybe downplaying that a little bit and looking at potentially adding some depth play into that. Right? Like, see about, seeing what it would take to go get a, Joe Mixon and Najee Harris, right? Like, there's deals to be done, something like that, or David Montgomery and Brian Robinson Jr. Like, those types of things where, you're certainly like with already having Kyron and Jacobs there. Jacobs would potentially give you a top 12, fringe RB1 type of performance rest of the season. Joe Mixon would be in that range too. David Montgomery would be in that range. So maybe at that point, it isn't necessarily about going and upgrading on the running back. It would maybe going and adding depth to the running back with some of those pieces there. But I would, that would be kind of how I would play that one out there if have no depth and all of that, because you're one injury away from that roster that looks really good right now to kind of turn into a deal where it's going to be tough to survive type of thing. So at that point there really is not, you're running back injury away from really having some issues and really having to rely on those wide receivers to bring it week in, week out to make up for having to start a, Braylon Allen or Tajay Spears or Tracy on the bench. At that point, that makes more sense. I was thinking about trading Hill for Kamara straight up so I can bench Jacobs just in case. Okay. I understand the logic there more so. I think though that I think that could certainly work. Certainly wouldn't mind the Alvin Kamara side of that. I think the Alvin Kamara is going to continue to produce very, very well in the Saints offense. Another guy I would look at is Kenneth Walker. Certainly wouldn't mind a Joe Mixon or David Montgomery in there as well. But if you can get the Hill for Kamara done straight up, I probably would. Great question, Blue. Xenon over on YouTube offered Amon-Ra and Swift for Henry. Do you think that works because the manager is a Lions fan? I think that might be a bit of an overpay if it's both Amon-Ra and DeAndre Swift for Derrick Henry. Now some of that's going to depend upon the format there, and if it's full point PPR, half point PPR, things like that. I said that it's a bit of an overpay, but really kind of looking in and digging into that probably gets the, and it's a no PPR. So it's a straight up standard league, basically, yards and touchdowns is what it sounds like. Okay. So as far as the, Amon-Ra and Swift for Henry, I mean, I could see it. I don't necessarily like giving up a top tier wide receiver. But you're certainly getting a top tier running back. So some of that will depend upon some of the rest of the roster construct. But as far as value goes, I think you're certainly in the ballpark for value on that one. So it's a fair offer, but some of that will be depending upon what the rest of the roster looks like if I'm really looking to try and pull that deal. So really good question. And then so Blue saying that on the bench would have Puka and Jacobs. Yeah, at that point that could certainly work. Blue, and when I'm constructing rosters, when I'm doing that, I really look at having 4, 5 type of running backs in case something happens. That I really look at having 5 or 6 wide receivers in case something happens. So, for instance, in our home league, my roster has been just decimated with a lot of injuries, but still have been able to remain very competitive throughout that. Right. So my roster, when I drafted it, had Puka Nacua, Rashee Rice, Chris Olave, Drake London, Christian Watson, I just picked up Christian Watson, but Terry McLaurin on it, and Calvin Ridley is also there. So there's a lot of depth to that one. Now, our roster constructs are a little bit different to the point too that, there's there's 20 rounds of the draft and a ton of depth and all of that. So in a standard type of league or in this type of deal where it's a 7 bench spots and 1 IR that's on ESPN, right? Like, it makes perfect sense how that kind of goes there. But running back wise, yeah, I get it. And so I would also be looking and kind of scouring the waiver wire each week and looking to try and add some depth through the waiver wire. But I do think that you've got a top end loaded team that can make a championship push at that point. And I wouldn't necessarily go crazy trying to add depth through a trade, but I would be looking to try and go additional depth through through the waiver wire. So looking at the deal, it was Walker, Kamara, JT, and Bijan. What order should I go with to try and trade Hill? I would start with the Bijan, see what that looks like there. Coin flip between Walker and Kamara. I'd lean the Walker side of it a little bit, but yeah, I mean, this is splitting hairs between Kenneth Walker and Alvin Kamara for me. In fact, I like it. Kamara's strength of schedule during the playoffs a little bit more than I like Kenneth Walker, but I think Kenneth Walker gets a little bit more done during the rest of season before the playoffs. So, I mean, realistically, I probably see these guys within 2 points of each other rest of season. So that would be how I would go that. And then I would rank Jonathan Taylor kind of last on that one. I'm really not a fan of the Jonathan Taylor strength of schedule for the playoffs and rest of season with the quarterback and all of that. Like, puts enough of a question mark that he'd be the 4th guy I'd be looking at there. So really good question. Scorpio over on YouTube. Should I trade CD for Jameer Gibbs and DJ Moore? I'm a very big proponent of getting the best player in the deal for when I'm making trades. So I don't know that I like offhand, I wouldn't trade CD for Jameer Gibbs and DJ Moore. I could certainly see where that could make sense if really hurting at running back and needing some different type of deal there. But yeah, this is one of those that Jameer Gibbs, I'm not that big of a fan of paying up for RB1 territory for Jameer Gibbs and where people are placing him and having that going through for a guy that consistently performs in RB2 territory and is in a split backfield for with David Montgomery, right? Like, between the two, I would personally rather have Jameer Gibbs than David Montgomery for roster construct, things like that. And I think that is a very big overpay for Jameer Gibbs and DJ Moore. So that's kind of my thoughts on that one, Scorpio, but really good question. All right. So Xenon saying that the team, no PPR, so it's just a standard league. Love Darnold, JT, Kyron, Cook, Swift, AJ, Jettis, the Hill, Amon-Ra, Cup, Kittle, Kelsey. Wow. Okay. So is this a Xenon? Is this like same kind of question? Is this like an 8-team league? Because that is a very, very stacked roster. Like, at that point, I mean, unless you're, so it's a 10-person league. Okay, so a little bit more stacked there, but this is even stacked, like really stacked for a 10-person league. I mean, I could see doing the Amon-Ra for the Henry side of it, and maybe needing a little bit extra to do that. So, and when saying that, the maybe just Amon-Ra for Henry, but it certainly seems to favor your side. It would, because a lot of Amon-Ra's points for fantasy, certainly come off of his volume to it. So in a standard type of scoring league, it would require Amon-Ra and something. And I don't know that I don't mind this deal. I think I actually probably would do it. You've got enough in the with AJ Brown, Justin Jefferson, Tyreek Hill, and Cooper Kupp to kind of weather that, and Derrick Henry and Kyron kind of put you over the top there, I think. So I like that one. Xenon also saying that they offered love for Hurts or Allen. Thinking of trading for Saquon to flip for Bijan. What should I trade away? Xenon, maybe I missed this one, but I'm not seeing where off that roster you submitted. I'm not seeing where Bijan's on that roster. So, and if you're offering love for Hurts or Allen, I would rather have both the Hurts or Allen side of that. So I wouldn't be doing that deal, especially since this is a standard scoring type of deal. I want quarterbacks that are going to use their legs a lot more, which both Hurts and Allen use the legs a lot more than Love does. And if you're thinking of trading away for Saquon to flip for Bijan, I would rather have Saquon than Bijan rest of the season there. So if you're getting Saquon, I would stop there. I get the appeal of Bijan, but I think Saquon Barkley is going to be the number one running back rest of the season. Bijan, I've got him kind of in that 4-5 type of range. So I would stick with the Saquon side of that. So if you can make a deal for Saquon, I would stay there. And really I would just kind of, engage the conversation to see what it would take to get the Saquon manager and see what that would look like. And so that'd be kind of where I'd be at on that one. But as far as potentially trying to make an offer on that one, I mean, I would see what it would take, maybe offering JT and either Kittle or Kelsey, and see what that would see if that could get a deal done there. And see if you could maybe try and do a JT and Kittle or Kelsey for Saquon and see what that looks like. Or really just maybe ask that manager JT and what to get Saquon. But really good question. Blue asking the question of, would you put Gibbs on top of Bijan, Kamara, Walker? No, I would not. I know that I'm certainly kind of an odd one out in the industry and the fantasy community on that one. But again, right, like personally, I would rather have David Montgomery and over Gibbs for the price that I have to pay on that one there, right? But if I'm doing straight up rankings between Bijan, Kamara, Walker, I've got all three of those guys over Jahmyr Gibbs. Adam over on YouTube, drop Rachaad White for Guerendo or Tucker. I don't know that I would, right? Like, while I think that we saw enough for Tucker to earn some more playing time on this one, I don't know that we're going to see Rachaad White truly surrender the backfield at that point. So there is certainly something to that. Guerendo, I think, is very much a rental piece for a week or two. So I'm not necessarily looking to drop Rachaad White, a guy that could potentially be in that running back 3 territory for me rest of the season, to go out and get a couple of guys that I think will be ultimately some some rental pieces for a week or two. Alrighty. Cap for Life over on YouTube. Hey bro, just got offered Devontae Smith for Devontae Adams. Do I pull the trigger? That's a good one. At this point, I don't know that I do. certainly get the appeal on that one. And if you've been dealing with the Davante Adams side of things here for the last few weeks, certainly has been very trying, right? And yeah, I want to see what Davante Adams looks like in this Jets offense, right? Like this is one of those that if we're going to see Aaron Rodgers, getting his guy back and becoming hyper targeted again to the point where we're seeing Davante Adams truly getting 10 plus targets a game, that will outweigh what Devontae Smith is going to do. So at this point, I would hold tight. If it's my team, I'm holding tight, but I can certainly understand the appeal on that one. Cat for life. Do I deal Schultz, Achane, and Darnold for Burrow and Madison? I would not. I wouldn't. No, that would no. Cat for life or Zay Flowers for Achane. No, I'd rather have Achane than Zay Flowers. Right? Like I get that this Miami offense has been putrid. Might be too nice of a word, but it's been bad. But Devon Achane, I think we're going to see, especially if Tua comes back, and I do think that we're going to see Tua, come back here, sooner than later. But when it's all said and done, I think that Devon Achane will be, potentially getting up into the fringe wide receiver 1 rest of the season. Zay Flowers, I think, is a back end wide receiver 2, fringe wide receiver 2 type of thing. So, no, I'd rather have the Zay Flowers side of it. Carter over on YouTube was asking, when do you think Pacheco returns? To be honest, I'm not sure. I know that there's still some time left on the IR, things like that, but it really is going to depend on what that looks like. Wouldn't surprise me to see if we see the Chiefs even slow roll that once he's healthy enough to return. But I think the Chiefs are eyeing that more of a actual NFL playoff side of things. We may see Pacheco back and starting to be worked back in and starting to build back up here towards the fantasy playoffs. But I think that's probably maybe about the earliest that we might see him. Adam over on YouTube, trade Pollard and Shaheed for Gibbs. Yeah, if you can pull off the and getting Jahmyr Gibbs for Pollard and Shaheed, I would do it. But I could tell you right now, if I'm the Gibbs manager, I wouldn't be doing that deal. But worth a shot seeing. Cat for life over on YouTube. Week 7 waiver wire grab. Maybe May Bengals defense or Vele 14 team PPR league. So 14 team league. I mean, it depends on your quarterback situation. I'm assuming if you're looking at May, it's pretty picked over, and if needing a quarterback, I could see that. The Bengals defense this week, I think, is very much a streaming grab, like very much so a streaming type of move there. If I've got the Bengals defense, I'm going to be starting them this week. The only exception would be if I have like Buffalo's defense or the Denver's defense or potentially Pittsburgh's defense, right? Like that's kind of where I would put that. I'd probably put Pittsburgh and Cincinnati about on the same plane. So that would be kind of where I would look at that one. But really good question there. Vele, no, I don't know that I'm just not a big believer in the Denver pass catchers outside of Cortland Sutton at this point. So, if you want to pick up Vele, I could see it, but yeah, this is a week that I don't think we're going to see him do much, if that makes any sense there. So, great question. Zena, should I keep JT this week or try and get Saquon this week? If you can get Saquon, I would move to try and get Saquon. And then Xenon asking AJ for Nabbers. I tried to get Chase, but the manager said no, but considered it. Yeah, I mean, you could certainly try and make that move there. This is one of those that I think rest of the season you're talking a couple of guys that are kind of back to back with each other, right? Neighbors has a little bit better playoff schedule than AJ Brown does. But I don't know that there's not enough between those two at this point for me to smash yes on either side. I think that's the AJ for Nabbers is a very, very fair move. I think I might honestly lean the AJ side of things, but again, right, AJ is going to be far more boom bust, I think, than what Neighbors will be rest of the season. Blue asking, would you do Hill and Tracy for Bijan? Yeah, I wouldn't mind that one. Again, some of that's going to be right, like in doing a 2-for-1 deal like that, with some concerns on the depth there, that could be a potential issue. But I don't mind that deal, and if I'm looking to do that, I probably would. Xenon, and going back to Swift and Amon-Ra for Henry, should I try and get Christian Watson from him as well? Records 4-2. Yeah. At that point, if you can do a 2-for-2 deal and get trading Swift and Amon-Ra to get Henry and Christian Watson, certainly could do it. Again, Christian Watson's going to be very boom bust for you and go from there. But you certainly had the depth to be able to weather that too. Bro over on YouTube gave Dobbins, McLaurin for Pittman, Leggett, and Mixon. Thoughts? I like that one. I would rather have McLaurin than either Pittman or Leggett, but I certainly understand that, and making the move from Dobbins to Mixon and all of that. I'd like the deal. And actually, I do. I like that deal, and I think that's pretty fair. And at that point, I like the overall deal. Blue asking, do you think having London and Bijan on the same team is good? I mean, to be honest, I've got both London and Bijan on my home team on the the league that the podcast is formed around and all of that. So I certainly didn't mind it and haven't minded it so far. But there is a component to that as well, that there is some of that I could certainly understand wanting to mitigate the risk a bit on that as well, right? And so when you're tying into two elite players like that, and two guys that are positional ones at the for fantasy there, if the offense gets cooking and we see Kirk Cousins drop back and throw the ball 50 times, well, that may be very, very tough for Bijan. And on the same side too, if we see them run the ball 35 plus times like we saw this last week, well, that also could have some difficulty there for London as well. But it's one of those that it all comes down to how you want to roster construct, and if you want to mitigate your risk, then no, you want to have those have separate guys at those types of positions. But I don't necessarily mind having that kind of deal there. But if that does concern you, I would see about maybe trying to go out and get Breece Hall instead of Bijan Robinson, right? Like that could potentially be an option there. Bro over on YouTube asking, do you think London's a top 5 receiver rest of the season? I don't. I think that he'll have a good rest of the season, but I don't see him getting into the top 5 range. Could he surprise me and get there? Certainly. But I think that we've got Chris London, much closer to an RB 10 when it's all said and done. Or not an RB10, a top 10 wide receiver rest of the season. So that's kind of where I would have that. Bro over on YouTube got rid of Bijan earlier, gave Bijan, Olave, Hunt for Debo, Dobbins, and London. I mean, I could potentially see that, but looking at that one, I would have rather have had the Bijan Hunt and Olave side of that one, but I could see where you could be potentially making the deal if needing to upgrade at wide receiver there. Besides Hall, manager doesn't want to trade there. And you have Kyron. Yeah, I mean, at that point, I may just look at trying to go like a straight up Tyreek for Kenneth Walker, Alvin Kamara, um, something like that type of deal there. So I mean, it really kind of comes down to that, how you want to play that one there. But yeah, if Hall's not going to do it, I don't know that it makes sense to go out there and try and with the roster construct that is, I think you're going to have to give up too much depth to try and go get like a Derrick Henry, a Saquon Barkley, something like that. You already had Kyron. And if not going the Bijan route, like that puts us down into, the Kenneth Walker, Alvin Kamara type of range there. So that's kind of where I'm thinking on that one is, if not wanting to go the Bijan route, and I understand not wanting to have the, you're kind of that stack there on that. I would probably look at just trying to go straight up for Kenneth Walker, Alvin Kamara. That kind of range there, but really good question. Bro was saying just really wanted to get rid of Olave, ended up going from Bijan to Mixon and McLaurin to London, and then from Olave to Debo. Yeah, I mean that's not certainly a way to do that for sure. Julian over on YouTube was planning on dropping Odunze tonight and grabbing Hopkins off the waivers as he heard he is about to be traded soon, perhaps to the Chiefs. What do you think? I think that very much with the NFL and the rumor mill that it's just that it's rumor mill until the deal is done, right? Like, so I can get wanting to drop Odunze and looking to pick up Hopkins. Even if the a deal is not to be done, I could see looking to potentially try and do that just because of the fact that Rome Odunze has been very difficult to try and deal with on the fantasy side of things and what's that look like. But DeAndre Hopkins has been very similar to it. So I don't know that you gain much on that one. But if you're looking to try and get ahead of a deal, I could do that. And I don't know that at that point you're probably trading depth for depth at that point. So I don't mind it. Xenon saying that they tried to get Hall, but the Hall manager didn't want Cook, which seems fair. Was it that unfair? It was not in the same ballpark for me, right? Like James Cook was when it comes down to it, like rest of the season, I see that being more of a running back 10 type of thing here for rest of the season. Like he'll be good, he'll be usable for fantasy, all of that kind of good stuff. Breece Hall, I've got him as running back 3-4 type of thing, right? Like he and Bijan Robinson, I've got those two as a coin flip there. And so with that being the case, there's a pretty big difference between kind of that running back 3, running back 4 to the point where rest of the season, you're probably talking 50, 60 points when it's all said and done. Which when you add that up over the remaining weeks, right? We're going into week 7. So there's 7 more weeks in the regular season, 3 more weeks in the postseason there. So if you're talking straight up to it, you're talking about a 5 points a week differential is kind of how that would kind of average out there. And so, if you're standing talking in a, a half point or even a standard type of league, like that's oftentimes what your tight end will be putting up there. So at that point, it's a running back for running back, but you're also that other manager would be giving up another position type of deal off their starting rosters. So that's kind of where that would come down to it. And Xenon saying that I don't think the Brace manager will trade him. They very well may not, right? Like if I've got one of those top end running backs, it's going to take a deal that kind of blows my socks off. If I've got them, I'm looking to deal them, right? Like it's got to be something that I am shot at wide receiver, and it's going to take a elite wide receiver to come in to make that deal happen. It's going to take something that innately makes my team just better for me to want to move off of that. If not, I want to hang on to the best player in the deal. So that's that's kind of how I would look at that one there. What's the best plan for playoffs? Bijan, Kamara, Walker. I mean, Bijan and Kamara both probably have a similar-ish strength of schedule when it comes to playoff. Kenneth Walker probably has a little bit of a down, a little bit of a down on that one, but because of fantasy playoffs, Kamara is looking at the Commanders, the Packers, and Vegas. So week 16 in the semifinals might be a little bit tougher there. Whereas Kenneth Walker playoff time is looking Green Bay, Minnesota, Chicago. So you've got a tougher defense set up there for that for sure, right? Green Bay, Minnesota's both been pretty good. Chicago's been a pretty good defense this year. So a little bit tougher there. Whereas with the Bijan, you're looking Las Vegas, the Giants, Commanders. So Bijan certainly has probably the best schedule for that there as well. So so I'm Blue saying, sorry, I'm just between them three. Yeah, I get it, right? Like you're kind of going back and forth there and all that. So in some of those, if there's, you're kind of going through it and all of that, Blue, if there's so much kind of like, where do I go? Some of that, like sometimes the best bet may be to sit on it for a night or two and and kind of rock and roll through that and kind of reassess and relook at that in the morning. But again, right, if I'm looking between those ones there, right, Bijan would be kind of my clear cut there. And then if looking at the playoffs, then it would be Kamara, then Walker. Bro, thoughts on Mahomes? Will he rebound or continue to be a bottom starting quarterback? I mean, this is not the first time we've seen this out of Mahomes, right? Like going back to last season, right? Mahomes certainly didn't live up to the draft capital there. And I think that this season is going to be another one for, another one that is long-term. I don't see him necessarily returning where he was drafted for fantasy. So I think that he can get into back end quarterback too, but at the end of the season, wouldn't surprise me to see him and Baker Mayfield have similar point values at the end of the season, and wouldn't surprise me if Baker even edges him out, right? Like that's the kind of thing that I may see there, right? So I think that we may see him bounce back, but I don't know that it's enough of a bounce back to pay off for that, the draft capital that was spent. Xenon over on YouTube asking, is Cook for Kamara a good move for the long term? I mean, I certainly wouldn't mind that move. I probably would like the Alvin Kamara side a little bit more than the James Cook side of things. Strength of schedule gets a little bit better for the playoffs there. Rest of the season, I've got those guys kind of back to back there, but that does mean that Alvin Kamara may very well come back to the median there a little bit instead of some of what we've seen, which we've already seen that happen there. But I do think that that's probably much more in the realm of possibility of trying to make a deal happen. Between the two, I probably lean the Alvin Kamara side. So good question. White Tiger over on YouTube. Sup, man? Doing solo tonight? Yep, it's just me rocking and rolling, doing the solo side of things, and the rest of the boys, Kevin and Alex, had some work stuff to take care of tonight. So we're here just trying to get everything rocking and rolling, and then we'll be back on Friday. Kevin should be back with me on Friday to rock and roll through the fantasy football huddle underneath the Friday night fantasy football lights to do bet set snaps. So should be fun. And shameless plug. Make sure that you're tuning in and subscribing on the YouTube, clicking that like, clicking that subscribe button, ring that bell so you get all the notifications when we do go live, as well as when we drop those waiver wires and all of those options there as well. So great question. Mr. Wumbo over on YouTube asking, no, I need running back help in this league. Have Bigsby in and counterintuitive to trade him away. But what sort of value do you think he carries? Trade him plus Pittman for Higgins or Devontae Smith? Yeah. You might be able to get that deal done. I wouldn't mind that. Especially if the other manager that you're trading Bigsby away to has ETN, that might be enough to get that deal done. Between the two, between Higgins and Devonta Smith, personally, I would probably lean the Devonta Smith side of things over the Higgins side of things, but either one of those I wouldn't necessarily mind. Bruh over on YouTube asking, where do you have Mixon and Henry on your rest of season? Derrick Henry, I've got him as a as kind of my running back 2 overall, right behind Saquon Barkley. Joe Mixon, I've got him as a pretty healthy running back 1. It's going to be a back end RB1, but he's going to be kind of in that that running back. He's going to probably vary a little bit here and there, but probably in that RB 10, 11, 12 kind of rest of season. So really good question. Xenon, should I move Kyron since Cup and Puka coming back and it might impact his performance? And I certainly get that thought process, but at that point, I don't know that I'm going to move Kyron just to move Kyron with Cup and Puka coming back, because some of this it'd be different too if we hadn't had track record of those guys on the field together and what that looks like. But Kyron, even with Koopa, combine the names together there, with Cooper Cup and Puka Nacua on the field at the same time, Kyron Williams was still seeing 80+% of the snap share last season. I don't know that that's really going to change. And I think that Kyron will certainly still get his. So, yeah, that's, I wouldn't move Kyron just for the sake of moving Kyron to try and protect a bit against a Cooper Cup and Puka comeback. So, Blue thinking that they'll just go Bijan because it's a better team, less injury prone. Yeah, I would agree that yeah, certainly some better team type of deal there. I've given up on trying to predict injuries at this point though, but just because they are so randomized, it seems. Xenon over on YouTube trying to buy low on Kamara, so I don't know if it would work. I mean, I would certainly kind of float it out there and see if Cook for Kamara could work straight up, right? And if not, seeing what it may take to try and bundle that to see a deal there. So certainly worth an option there. But it's gonna be low to buy low on Kamara with how he's come out on the season and certainly had a came out strong. Certainly the last 2 weeks haven't been necessarily great. Denver, tough matchup this week. Chargers, tougher matchup next week. So if trying to buy low, that option may be looking more to buy low after week 8. But if you could do a deal straight up on that one, I would do it. So appreciate that one. And Mr. Wumbo saying that Smith took his bye already. Yeah, sure has. So yeah, that is beneficial there as well. So you're not having to navigate that going forward. Bro over on YouTube asking start Mahomes or the Darnold this weekend. It's a good question. I would go with Sam Darnold on this one, right? It's a tougher matchup against Detroit. Now, Detroit has that Detroit Minnesota game, I think, is going to get higher scoring when it's all said and done. I think there's going to be a lot of points scored in this one. San Francisco, KC. There will be points put up in this one, but it's it's not going to surprise me if we see both of these teams end up in the scoring about 20 to 24 points, and this be a 24-21 type of matchup. Whereas that Minnesota Detroit game wouldn't surprise me if we see this one get into like a 30 to 27 type of range there. So I like the Darnold side of that better. Blue over on YouTube, thanks for answering all the questions, my man. Just subscribed and liked. Have a good night. Appreciate that. And appreciate the subscription there. Guys, I'm gonna answer the rest of the questions that are in the chat here, and we're gonna call it a night after that. After those, Marlon, who do you prefer rest of season? Brian Thomas Jr. or McLaurin? Don't feel that confident with the Jags offensive situation, and with Engram coming back, it's not just a very good sign for Brian Thomas Jr., although I like him. Yeah, I think Brian Thomas Jr. will be good long term. I do like Terry McLaurin slightly more, and I mean about that much more for than Brian Thomas Jr. this season. I think that Terry McLaurin and Jaden Daniels are just starting to develop that connection, and I think that will be better when it's all said and done to it. And then you're right, that Jags offense does concern me just a little bit there. Xenon over on YouTube, should I cancel the Amon-Ra and Swift for Henry and just try for Amon-Ra and see if it works? I mean, it certainly wouldn't be a bad thought there. I would try and see if Amon-Ra for Henry works straight up, and if it does, great, and if not, see what it would take to get the deal done. So great question. Bro, saying McLaurin for sure. Back for Marlon's question. Marlon giving the thumbs up. Mr. Wumbo saying thanks a lot. White Tiger saying that they have Bijan. Should I still carry Algier? I would. Algier's got some potential flex consideration here and there, right? Like it's going to be really tough to pick the start to him. But if Bijan goes down, I want the handcuff there. And at that point, the backfield gets far cleaner and clearer. And at that point, I would certainly not want to be trying to pick up Algier off of a waiver wire. Over on YouTube, Darnold or Goff rest of season. That's another good one. So Darnold, Goff, I would probably lean the Sam Darnold side of things. But again, it's about that far apart, and it really is a coin flip for me on that one. And where it comes down to is the fact that Minnesota's schedule to finish out the season and strength of playoff, I like that strength of schedule better than I like Jared Goff's strength of schedule going down the stretch here. So I think both are usable, but I would lean on the Sam Darnold side. Really good question. Bro, over on YouTube saying thanks, have a good night. We'll sub and like, appreciate it. Balloons battle over on YouTube. League mate offered Gibbs and Hill for CD and Pollard. Thoughts? I don't mind that. But between the two, I would rather have and that's really tough. Gibbs, Hill, CD, and Pollard. Between the two, between that grouping, I probably like the Gibbs and Hill side a little bit more than the CD and Pollard side. I think what you lose out from going from CD to Hill is made up for on the Gibbs and Pollard side of things. And I think and I think with Tua returning, the Hill side takes off, and we could certainly see Tyreek return to potential top 5, your top 5 type of rest of season there. So I like it. I would lean on the Gibbs and Hill side of things. Marlon saying thank you and have a good night. You're most welcome, guys. K over on YouTube, Jalen Warden, Charbonnet, Ray Davis, or Sean Tucker. I'm not quite sure what the question is here. If it's rest of season, if it's this week starting, things like that. So Kay a little bit more information and I can try and answer that one. Recon over on YouTube, 12-man PPR, got Josh Allen, Saquon, Chase Brown, Flowers, Hill, Laporta, Juju, Aubrey is a kicker, Braylon Allen, Keon Coleman, Blake Corman, Leggett, Mostert, Pickens, Tua. Would you trade Flowers and Pickens for Cup? I would probably do that one, but I would be concerned about my my depth at that point. But I do think that when Cooper Kupp returns, we see, like, at that point, I really when Cooper Kupp returns and Tua returns, I really, really like that 1-2 punch that you'd have at wide receiver 1, wide receiver 2 between Tyreek Hill and Cooper Kupp. But I would be concerned about the depth of that roster and what that might look like to be able to try and bring that thing home. So, I mean, I get it. I probably would do it myself, but I'm also looking to see what moves I can make to bolster my depth at both running back and at wide receiver on that one. Recon saying that personally they just don't know because they feel like Russell Wilson starting back will make Pickens a solid target. Maybe. I mean, maybe. I'm not a big believer in the Russell Wilson experiment anymore. Now, granted, full disclosure, they're kind of a burnt Broncos fan on that one there, so you can take it for what it's worth on that one there. But I don't know that Russell Wilson, coming into this offense changes Pickens upside there much. Also, I don't know that we see. I also don't know that we're going to see that change happen at the at that one, right? From the standpoint that the Steelers are 4-2 and have been winning games with Justin Fields. And at that point, I don't know that you're going to make a switch when you're when you're winning games and things don't look bad on the offensive side of the ball. So who do I drop? Who do I trade? Speaking rest of the season wise, I mean, it all comes down to Recon. It's all going to come down to who you're trading for, and who you're getting, and who you're dropping for. Right? Like that's a question that it just, there's so much depends in that one that I don't have a solid answer for you on that one. Right? Like, some guys to target it with this roster, I would be looking to target and try and go get a more firm running back 2. I'd be looking at trying to add some additional depth at the running back, or the wide receiver position. I don't know that Blake Corum does much for you with the fact that he's going to be handcuffed to Kyron, and since I don't see Kyron on this roster, same thing with Braylon Edwards. More of a handcuff for Breece Hall. So, I mean, those would be potential guys that if looking, if you've got something better that you can add off the waiver wire, then potentially would be looking to do that. Trade wise, I'm looking to upgrade running back 2. I'm looking to upgrade wide receiver a little bit. And I'm looking to add some depth at both running back and wide receiver with this roster. So that's how I would kind of look at that and try and manage that one and kind of go from there. And at that point, if you've got some other thoughts on who you'd like to target, who you'd like to go through, I'd recommend hopping back in when we go live on Friday. We go live Fridays at 11 p.m. Eastern, and we can we can dive deeper into that one. Would I try to trade for Olave? Potentially I would. There is some concern though, right? Like if trading for Olave, he's in the concussion protocol. He's got the short week this week, so we likely won't see him play this week. But I don't mind Olave as a potential upgrade into that wide receiver room. Okay. sorry, needed waiver ad start for this week, but also interested in rest of season value. So, let's see here. So for this week, as far as who I would start, between Jalen Warren, Zach Charbonnet, Ray Davis, and Sean Tucker, I would lean the Charbonnet side of things just because, this early in the week, I have a better feeling I know what I get at that point, right? Then I would probably lean on the Jalen Warren side, then the Ray Davis side, then the Sean Tucker side of things, as far as what that would look like. As far as rest of season, I think Charbonnet would be my number one guy there. Ray Davis, Sean Tucker, I think are they're still going to be behind the guy in front of them. Ray Davis, I don't know that we're going to see him claim more than 30 or 35% of the snap share in that. Sean Tucker, I think when Rachaad White and Bucky Irving both healthy, I think Sean Tucker returns to RB3 territory, or the third running back on that depth chart. So I don't know that there's much there. Same thing with Jalen Warren. I think he returns to about that 30%. Steelers certainly aren't throwing the ball around as much. So Charbonnet would be my rest of season guy out of that one as well. Alrighty. So a couple more questions come in here. Nino over on YouTube. That's you're going to be the last one that I get to tonight. And then any other questions after that one, I would tell everybody to tune in to the Friday show, 11 p.m. Eastern. I believe I already answered some. Would you try to trade for Olave? I would. I think you could upgrade that roster a little bit there. And for the question of like Pickens and Corum for Olave, I wouldn't accept it. If that offer was floated over to me, it would. Corum's a guy that quite frankly most leagues should be surfing the waiver wire. So it doesn't really do anything for me on that one. And between Pickens and Olave, I would certainly rather have Olave than Pickens at that point. So, I mean, Pickens starts the conversation around that, but it would require something else in there to get that job done. And the rest of the running backs that you got would be an overpay at that point to add that with Pickens. What value can I get from Kittle, since I think Kittle is a boom bust and Kelsey is going to now get like 8 targets a game, at least since Kansas City doesn't have a lot of wide receivers. I mean, in a standard scoring league, Xenon, it's the value is certainly going to be lower than, right? Like where you're probably looking at that one. You're probably maybe looking at like Jameson Williams, maybe T. Higgins. Both of those guys are also going to be boom bust. Potentially DJ Moore. You know what? I'd probably float it out there and see if I could get Cooper Kupp. See if I could get a Cooper Kupp for Kittle straight up and see what that would look like. Joe, I think we might have missed this question earlier. So Joe's 2-4, 12-man, full point PPR. Would you trade Joe Mixon for Devontae? Other wide receivers are JMO, CD. Other wide receivers are Cook, Chase Brown, Aaron Jones. I would not. I'd rather have the Joe Mixon side than the Devontae Adams side on that one. I could see the allure to try and upgrade that one, but I don't know that you're necessarily going to get more return for value on Devontae Adams over Joe Mixon in this case, especially in a full point PPR. Looking at it, I think Joe Mixon is probably going to be about a top 10 running back rest of the season. I think Devontae Adams, even going over to the Jets, I think he sneaks into top 24 type of wide receiver, but that's kind of it there. And I would rather have the Joe Mixon side. I would have made what I would look at doing is potentially maybe trying to trade Aaron Jones and seeing what I could do there. You could certainly try and move Aaron Jones for a potential upgrade at wide receiver. Now it's not going to be a drastic move, but maybe seeing if I could go and get like a Terry McLaurin, a Devontae Smith, something like that for an Aaron Jones, and just see what the conversation looks like at that point. Alrighty. Nino over on YouTube, trade Mike Evans and Tank Dell for AJ Brown. So yeah, I'd probably do this one. I really like the Mike Evans side of things, but I do think that AJ Brown certainly kind of a step above there. And I don't mind moving off the Tank Dell side of things, because when Nico comes back, I do think that we see Tank Dell take a step back on that one as well. Kay was saying thank you on that one. Joe saying that skipping the question on that one. I went back and got you though. Nino saying that thinks he's just continuing the question. I sure was. Thanks for the support in the chat there, guys. Joe saying thanks, man. And then Nino, just a quick waiver one. Is Lazard droppable for Demario Douglas? I don't know that Allen Lazard is droppable at this point, right? Like, while yes, I understand that Devontae Adams is now in New York and all of that, it may take a little bit for that to come up to speed, how that comes to look and work. But Allen Lazard certainly has Aaron Rodgers' eye, and certainly has been getting the work on that one. So I don't know that I want to necessarily drop Lazard straight up for Demario Douglas. I like Demario Douglas, and I like Demario Douglas rest of the season, but I don't know that I would pull the trigger quite yet on that one. Like, it's certainly kind of in that almost 50-50 kind of split for me. Like, do I do it? Do I don't do it? I may hold tight on that one, but yeah, I mean, at that point it's going to be tight. And Nino also saying thank you, my guy. You are most welcome. So at that point, Nino, I'd tell you that it is your roster, and if you've got a if you've got a hunch on one way or another, you've got a strong feeling one way or another, I would move certainly do that one. I don't know that I would necessarily do it, but especially if there's another option on the roster that could be more droppable. But I say all that to say, you know what? I know if this was my roster, I probably would drop Lazard for Demario Douglas. But man, that just seems a little bit wrong on that one, just from what we've seen out of Allen Lazard all season. This is a guy getting 7, 8, 9. Yeah, I probably wouldn't. If you've got somebody else that's an easier drop candidate than Lazard, I would do it. I do like Demario Douglas, but I just don't know that I'm pulling the trigger to drop Lazard for it. So Nino saying, yeah, it's 50-50, so I'll probably stick with Lazard for the easier schedule. Yeah. And you know what, that could certainly change, and I'd be willing to admit that I very well could be wrong on that one. But at this point, I'd probably stick with Lazard just from what we've seen. Pick up Chubb or Tucker over on Cy1 on YouTube there. I mean, if you've got roster spots for Nick Chubb, I would pick him up and stash him, just from the standpoint that, right, if Nick Chubb comes back and returns to form, that's a great move. Sean Tucker, I do see that as a 1, maybe 2 week rental type of thing. I think that we're going to see him gain a little bit more workload in this one, but I just don't know that I'm going to really bank on that one being rest of the season on the long-term move there. Nino saying that doing the deal with Lazard would be AJ Brown will be or the wide receiver doing that AJ Brown deal. The wide receivers will be CD, Cup, AJ Brown. So now Lazard or Douglas would be a flex. Okay. Yeah, I like that one. Like Mike Evans is a boom bust type of deal. AJ Brown's a boom bust type of deal. I think AJ Brown has a few more boom weeks and a little bit higher ceiling on that one. So I don't mind that deal at all. The tank move, right? Like I you're certainly kind of making a move down there with either Lazard or Douglas, but I really like the upside on what that deal would look like, and there certainly could be some potential other options as a flex going forward. But yeah, guys, I appreciate everybody tuning in, chiming in, chatting. A lot of fun tonight, and certainly a lot of great questions, and appreciate everybody you're participating in there. We'll be back on Friday, 11 p.m. Eastern, and really kind of rocking and rolling there. Side one, this is last comment saying that Gibbs will win leagues down the stretch. Maybe. I think for him to win leagues down the stretch, it's going to require him to be more, have it more than about a 50-50 timeshare, in which he's also not succeeding most of the goal line work to David Montgomery. But I can certainly see that, and it certainly could happen. But yeah, so guys, I do appreciate everybody tuning in. That's going to do it for us, or do it for me, I guess, riding solo tonight. Nino saying, yes, sir, appreciate it. Have a good one. Will do. So, but that's going to do it for me. And we'll be back again live 11 p.m. Eastern on Friday for the fantasy football huddle for the Bet Set Snap underneath the Friday night fantasy football lights. And should have Kevin back for that one as well. Be a lot of fun. Appreciate everybody tuning in. Appreciate all the comments and questions. Have a good one. Be safe. Toodaloo.